Is new always better? When buying a home, it's widely believed that the newer the home, the better it is. But is this actually true? Well, the answer may surprise you. Today, we're unraveling the mystery behind choosing between pre-sales, or also commonly referred to as pre-construction homes. That's right, those shiny new properties still under construction, and resale homes, the ones with a story or two to tell. This isn't just about picking a house. It's about choosing a lifestyle, investment, and a future. So buckle up as we explore the perks and pitfalls that come with each option, helping you make a choice that feels right for you. Let's kick things off with pre-sale properties, or as I like to call them, the future home. Imagine buying a house based on a blueprint or a model show home. Sounds a bit like a leap of faith, doesn't it? You're essentially deciding on a floor plan and some glossy finishes in a showroom. But here's the catch. The actual unit that you buy might not match the showroom's charm, especially if you're not getting the exact model that you saw in person. Generally, developers and their sales teams will have 1 or 2 showrooms, but they may have 10, 15, or even 20 different floor plans. So yes, you get an idea of the finishing, appliances, and color schemes, but if you're not purchasing a unit with that identical layout, then you're not actually going to be able to get a feel for that floor plan. And sometimes there isn't even a presentation center or showroom. So if you're someone who wants to actually physically be in the space before you buy it, then it's something you're going to need to consider. Now, you might be thinking, but it's new. That's got to count for something, right? Absolutely. A new property does have its benefits. You get to pick the color scheme and some of the finishes, maybe the type of flooring or kitchen cabinets, making it feel more like you from the get-go. Are you going to have carpets or laminate in the bedrooms? Maybe you can upgrade appliances or even potentially slightly alter the unit that you're purchasing. Of course, with a resale property, you can always go back and make changes through renovations. However, doing it from the start is obviously a lot more ideal. Additionally, there's always something special about being the first person to own something. However, you have to remember the price tag. New often means pricier, and when it comes to negotiating, there's often not a lot of wiggle room in the price, especially if it's a busy market. Developers have specific financial targets they must hit, not only to attain financing for the project to move forward, but also to be profitable. They are objective in the selling process, which often differs from the emotional aspect of the resale market. This is a business. They don't care about your love letter or how much you love the area. It all comes down to whether the numbers make sense or not. Now, that's not to say that you can never negotiate or that it's not worth trying. Sometimes you'll be able to negotiate for things such as decorating allowances, maybe an additional parking spot, some free upgrades, but it's not very often that you can actually get a major discount on the price. Some of the other things that you may be able to potentially negotiate on are the assignment fees as well as the deposit structure. But I wouldn't be walking into a busy pre-sale center and trying to negotiate $50,000 or $100,000 off a property like you might with a resale. Speaking of resale homes, let's switch gears and chat about them a little bit. These are homes that come with a history and you get to actually walk through them, touch the walls, and feel the space. There's no surprises on the end product here. You know exactly what you're getting. And just to add to this point, when you're purchasing a pre-sale unit, the developers have some degree of an allowable variance, generally within 3 to 5% of the square footage that they promised you. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but if you're paying $1,000, $1,500, or $2,000 per square foot and you're shorted 25 square feet, well, that adds up pretty quickly. Another pro of resale is that there's generally more negotiation room, as already mentioned. However, these properties are typically less modern unless they've been substantially renovated. And on this note, a resale property may potentially need updating depending on its state and your taste. This provides an opportunity for some, but a headache for others. Most people prefer a home which is essentially a home that you can move right into and not have to make any major changes. But guess what that means? The turnkey homes are the ones with the highest level of interest and the least opportunity for negotiation in most cases. But if you're someone who's willing to put in a bit of work or hire it out to the applicable trades, this is where I believe some of the best potential deals are from a financial perspective, but it's definitely not for everyone. Going back to pre-sales for a minute, I want to cover some of their benefits. The first one is that they provide flexibility. And what I mean by this is they typically have a 2 to 4 year completion time frame. Now, this is going to depend on a couple of factors, such as if it's a townhome or condo, a high-rise or low-rise, and if it's wood frame or concrete, because a wood frame townhome is going to be the quickest completion and a concrete high-rise is going to be the longest completion. What about their financing, and what about construction? Additionally, even though they provide you with an estimated completion completion date, projects aren't always on time, and there's generally some flexibility here. I would say on average it's usually done slightly afterwards, whether that's a few weeks or a few months. But I've actually also seen instances where the project completes early, so understand that this can also happen as well. Another pro to purchasing pre-sale properties is that you have more leverage. And what do I mean by this? Well, the answer is twofold. Number one is that you're able to purchase the rights to this future home, but you're only required to put down a portion of the required funds prior to completion. Essentially, you only need to provide a deposit in the amount of between 5% to 20% in most cases. This varies from project to project and is at the discretion of the developer, but most commonly, I see anywhere between 10 to 15%. Additionally, there's likely going to be a deposit structure or schedule, which is generally going to be staggered. So for example, this may be 5% within 7 days of writing the contract, another 5% in 90 days, and then a final 5% in 6 months or a year. On top of this, the second aspect of leverage is the fact that you don't need a mortgage until the property is actually complete. So the major bonus here is that you have the opportunity for your money to grow through price appreciation of the property over this period of time without having a mortgage payment. The beauty of this is that if you put down 10% on a $500,000 home, and by the time the home's built, it's now worth 10% more or $550,000, you didn't get an ROI of 10%. You actually got an ROI of 100% because you only had $50,000 invested. Now, keep in mind that's prior to any sort of taxes or fees that may be associated with selling it, but there are other ways to get that equity out of the property, which we'll save for another video. This is just a simplified calculation for explanation purposes, but hopefully it makes sense. Conversely, with a resale property, even though your property is increasing in value if the market's going up, and you get some of the same leverage benefits, you're still gonna have to pay down your mortgage, and a portion of that is going towards interest. So a lot of people, and especially the investors, love this aspect of pre-sales. Another major pro with pre-sales is the fact that they're hassle-free. You really don't have to do anything while it's being constructed, and this goes for whether you're purchasing it for yourself or if you're an investor. There's no need for maintenance or dealing with the tenant for the time being if it's a rental property. In comparison, if it was a resale property and you're doing renovations, then obviously that's gonna take some time, effort, and additional funds. And just to name a few more benefits of pre-sales, if you are planning to rent it out in the future, or maybe you wanna live there first and then rent it out later, tenants obviously desire newer properties. And because of this, you're typically gonna be able to charge a higher rent versus an older property, given that they're similar. Now, back to a couple of cons or risks of pre-sale properties, which is the thing that I think most people don't pay attention to. The first being is that there's often time delays. So as I mentioned, even though there's an estimated completion date, there's no guarantee that it's gonna happen then. It could be earlier or it could even be later. Next is the fact that there's GST on top of the purchase price. This means on pre-sale properties, you're gonna have to pay 5% GST on top of the purchase price. So on a $500,000 condo, that's gonna be an additional $25,000. Next is gonna be a lack of quality assurance. Now, there's ways to go about trying to mitigate these risks. However, they're always inherently gonna be there. Generally, the showroom is gonna be the nicest, most well put together, but there's really no guarantees that when you get your actual unit, that's gonna be to the same standard. Now, you do get a final walkthrough where you get to walk through the unit and mark up the walls and anything else where you find deficiencies, and the developer then has to come back and fix them. However, it's not always as clear-cut as it may seem, and sometimes it can be difficult to get them to come back and actually complete it to the standard that you're hoping for. And generally, they do a pretty good job, and especially if you're with a trusted and well-known developer, but I've also heard some horror stories, so just keep it in mind. And lastly, in the absolute worst case situation, the project may not complete. If the developer isn't able to reach their target level of funding and they can't get the loan from the bank, then the project isn't able to continue. This actually happened to my parents years ago when they bought a pre-sale project out in Penticton. They had bought it in an early phase, and unfortunately, the developer wasn't able to sell off enough of the remaining units to reach the requirements to attain financing. Because of this, they had their money tied up in the project for over 2 years. So what happened to their deposit money? Well, the good news is that they did get it back, and this would be the case if it ever happened to you as well. However, they essentially lost money because of inflation and opportunity costs. What I mean by that is the money could have been making them money elsewhere, whether that be in another project, in the stock market, a high interest savings account, anything really. And believe it or not, the same goes for any money that you have sitting in a bank account. But that's a topic for another video. So on a similar note, let's compare older versus newer properties in the resale market. So older properties, as already mentioned, may need more updates. However, a lot of the times they're larger and more functional, especially if we're talking about condos. But that can also come at a price because of the fact that they'll likely have higher strata fees, which is due to the combination of two things. Number one being the size of the unit, as strata fees are based on unit entitlement, which essentially means that larger units pay more and smaller units pay less. And the second thing being that the older the strata properties get, the more the expenses come up, such as roofs, doors, balconies, siding, and more. And since the strata corporation has to plan on how to pay for these things, most of the time they're going to increase the strata fees in order to plan for future events. For more information on all things strata, make sure you check out my previous video on the topic as soon as you're finished this one. Conversely, with a newer property, it's gonna be more modern. You're not gonna have to do any renovations or much maintenance at the start. It feels like every single year, condos just keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. In previous years, you'd see most of the one beds being around 600 square feet and the two beds being around 950 to 1,000 square feet. Now it feels like more often than not, the one beds are closer to 450 to 500 square feet and the two beds are in the 700 to 800 square foot range, with many even closer to 600 square feet. The reason for this is the more units that a developer can fit into a building, the more money that they're going to make. And as a business, their goal is to make the most profit possible. Remember what we talked about before? Now the benefit here is that the newer properties are going to have lower strata fees most of the time, both because they're newer and typically because they're a little bit smaller. Additionally, whether it's a pre-sale property or it's just in the first few years after being built, that property is going to have a warranty known as the 2510 warranty. So what exactly is this? Well, you have 2 years of warranty on any defects to the labor and materials, and of course there are some limits that do apply, but I'm not going to get into it too much in this video. You then have 5 years of warranty on the building envelope, and this includes water penetration. And then lastly, you have 10 years of warranty on the actual structure of the building. While we're on this topic, let's talk about the quality of the materials and finishing in a new build versus an old one. Is newer better in this case? You'd think so, right? Well, honestly, the answer is sometimes, but not always. They've definitely come a long way with soundproofing, which is especially noticeable in wood frame buildings. The same goes for other things such as the materials that they use for high rises after the whole leaky condo crisis in Vancouver, as well as no longer using poly-B piping. But there are other things I often see done more cheaply or just plain incorrectly in some of the new construction. Whether that's the developer trying to cut corners or contractors trying to save a few bucks, it happens more than you'd think and often goes unnoticed until you start to notice these issues years later when it's already too late. So taking that all into account, the answer is pretty clear, which is the better of the two between new construction and resale properties, right? Or maybe this has you rethinking your original opinions. Either way, I hope you learned something new. If you do have any questions, leave it down below and I'll be sure to get back to you whenever I get a chance. Lastly, if you are considering moving to Surrey, Langley, or any of the surrounding cities for that matter, or you just want to chat about real estate, you can scroll down and click the first link in the description to book a call with me at a time that works best for you. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you check out another video on our channel before you get out of here, and we'll see you in the next video.